I believe that on the first night I went to Gatsby's house, I was one of the few guests who had actually been invited. People were not invited, they went there. They got into automobiles which bore them out to Long Island, and somehow they ended up at Gatsby's door. Once there, they were introduced by somebody who knew Gatsby, and after that, they conducted themselves according to the rules of behavior associated with amusement parks. Sometimes they came and went without having met Gatsby at all, came for the party with the simplicity of heart that was its own ticket of admission. I had been actually invited. A chauffeur in a uniform of robin's egg blue crossed my lawn early that Saturday morning with a surprisingly formal note from his employer. The honor would be entirely Gatsby's, it said, if I would attend his little party that night. He had seen me several times and had intended to call me on long before, but a peculiar combination of circumstances had prevented it. Signed J. Gatsby, in a majestic hand. Dressed up in white flannels, I went over to his lawn a little after 7 and wandered around rather ill at ease among swirls and eddies of people I didn't know, though here and there was a face I had noticed on the commuting train. I was immediately struck by the number of young Englishmen dotted about, all well dressed, all looking a little hungry, and all talking in a low, earnest voice to solid and prosperous Americans. I was sure that they were selling something, bonds or insurance or automobiles. They were at least agonizingly aware of the easy money in the vicinity and convinced that it was theirs for a few words in the right key. As soon as I arrived, I made an attempt to find my host, but the 2 or 3 people of whom I asked his whereabouts stared at me in such an amazed way, and denied so vehemently any knowledge of his movements, that I slunk off in the directions of the cocktail table, the only place in the garden where a single man could linger without looking purposeless and alone. I was on my way to get roaring drunk from sheer embarrassment when Jordan Baker came out of the house and stood at the head of the marble steps, leaning a little backwards and looking with contemptuous interest down into the garden. Welcome or not, I found it necessary to attach myself to someone before I should begin to address cordial remarks to the passerby.
Hello.
I thought you might be here. I remembered you lived next door too. Hello. Sorry you didn't win.
That was for the golf tournament. She had lost in the finals the week before.
You don't know who we are, but we met you here about a month ago. You dyed your hair since then.
For the 2 girls I moved casually on, and her remarks were addressed to the premature moon, produced like the supper, no doubt, out of a caterer's basket. With Jordan's slender golden arm resting in mine, we descended the steps and sauntered about the garden. A tray of cocktails floated at us through the twilight, and we sat down at the table with the 2 girls in yellow and 3 men, each one introduced to us as Mr. Mumble. It was for Lucille, too.
I'd like to come. I never care what I do, so I always have a good time. When I was here last, I tore my gown on a chair, and he asked me my address. Inside of a week, I got a package from Corey Ayers with a new evening gown in it. Did you keep it? Sure I did. I was going to wear it tonight, but it was too big in the bust and had to be altered. It was gas blue with lavender beads, $265. There's something funny about a fellow that'll do a thing like that. He doesn't want any trouble with anybody.
Who doesn't?
Gatsby. Somebody told me.
The 2 girls and Jordan leaned together confidentially.
Somebody told me that they thought he killed him once.
A thrill passed over all of us. The 3 Mr. Mumbles bent forward and listened eagerly.
I don't think it's so much that. It's more like he was a German spy during the war.
One of the men nodded in confirmation.
Heard that from a man who knew all about it. Worked with him in Germany.
Oh no, it couldn't be that. He was in the American Army during the war.
As her credulity switched back to her, she leaned forward with enthusiasm.
You'll look at him sometimes when he thinks nobody's looking at him. I'll bet he killed him.
She narrowed her eyes and shivered. Lucille shivered. We all turned and looked around for Gatsby. It was testimony to the romantic speculation he inspired that there were whispers about him from those who found little that was necessary to whisper about in this world. The first supper, there would be another one after midnight, was now being served, and Jordan invited me to join her own party, who were spread out about a table on the other side of the garden. There were 3 married couples and Jordan's escort, a persistent undergraduate given to violent innuendo, and obviously under the impression that sooner or later Jordan was going to yield them up her person to a greater or lesser degree. Instead of rambling, this party had preserved dignified homogeneity and assumed itself the function of representing the state nobility in the countryside, the East Egg condescending to the West Egg, and careful on guard against its spectroscopic gaiety.
Let's get out. This is much too polite for me.
We got up and she explained that we were going to find the host. I had never met him, she said, and it was making me uneasy. The undergraduate nodded in a cynical and melancholic way. The bar where we glanced first was crowded, but Gatsby was not there. She couldn't find him from the top of the steps, and he wasn't on the veranda. On a chance, we tried an open-looking door and walked into a high Gothic library, paneled with carved English oak, probably transported complete from some ruin overseas. A stout, middle-aged man with enormous owl-eyed spectacles was sitting somewhat drunk on the edge of a great table, staring with unsteady concentration at the shelves of books. As we entered, he wheeled excitedly around and examined Jordan from head to toe.
What do you think?
About what?
About that? As a matter of fact, you didn't bother to ascertain. I ascertained. They're real.
The books?
Absolutely real. Have pages and everything. I thought they'd be a nice, durable cardboard. Matter of fact, they're absolutely real. Pages and... Let me show you.
Taking our skepticism for granted, we rushed to the bookcases and returned with Volume 1 of the Stoddard Lectures.
See, it's a bona fide piece of printed matter. It fooled me. This fellow's a regular Belasco. It's a triumph. What thoroughness. What realism. No one to stop to. Didn't cut the pages. What do you want? What do you expect?
He snatched a book from me and replaced it hastily on the shelf, muttering that if one brick was removed, the whole library was liable to collapse.
Who brought you? Or did you just come? I was brought. Most people were brought. I was brought by a woman named Roosevelt. It was Claude Roosevelt. You know her? Met her somewhere last night. I've been drunk for about a week now. I thought it might sober me up to sit in a library.
Has it?
A little bit. I've only been here for an hour. Did I tell you about the books? They're real. They're...
You told us.
We shook hands with him gravely and went back outdoors. There was dancing now on the canvas in the garden. Old men pushing young girls backward in eternal graceless circles, superior couples holding each other tortuously, fashionably, and keeping in the corners, and a great number of single girls dancing individualistically, or reliving the orchestra for a moment of the burden, of the banjo or the traps. By midnight, the hilarity had increased. A celebrated tenor had sung in Italian, a notorious contralto had sung in jazz, and between the numbers people were doing stunts all over the garden, while happy, vacuous bursts of laughter rose toward the summer sky. A pair of stage twins, who turned out to be the girls in yellow, did a baby act in costume, and champagne was served in glasses bigger than finger bowls. The moon had risen higher, and floating in the sound was a triangle of silver scales, trembling a little to the stiff tinny drip of the banjos. I was still with Jordan Baker. We were sitting at a table with a man of about my age and a roundy little girl, who gave way upon the slightest provocation to uncontrollable laughter. I was enjoying myself now. I had taken 2 fingerfuls of champagne, and the scene had changed before my eyes into something significant, elemental, and profound. At a lull in the entertainment, the man looked at me and smiled.
Your face is familiar. Weren't you in the 3rd Division during the war?
Oh yes, I was in the 9th Machine Gun Battalion.
I was in the 7th Infantry until June 1918. I knew I'd seen you somewhere before.
We talked for a moment about some wet, grey little villages in France. Evidently, he lived in this vicinity, for he had told me he had just bought a hydroplane and was going to try it out this morning.
Want to go with me, old sport? Just near the shore, along the sound.
What time?
Anytime that suits you best.
It was on the tip of my tongue to ask his name when Jordan looked around and smiled.
Having a gay time now?
Much better. This is an unusual party for me. I haven't even seen the host. I live over there, and this man Gatsby brought over his chauffeur with an invitation.
I'm Gatsby.
What? Oh, I beg your pardon.
I'm sorry, old sport. I thought you knew.
His smile understandingly, much more than understandingly. It was one of those rare smiles with the quality of eternal reassurance in it that you may come across 4 or 5 times in life. It faced, or seemed to face, the whole external world for an instant, and then concentrated on you with an irresistible prejudice in your favor. It understood you just so far as you wanted to be understood, and assured you that it had precisely the impression of you that, at your best, you hoped to convey. Precisely at the point it vanished, and I was looking at an elegant young roughneck, a year or two ever 30, whose elaborate formality of speech just missed being absurd. Some time before he introduced himself, I got a strong impression that he was picking his word with care. Almost at the moment when Mr. Gatsby identified himself, a butler hurried toward him with the information that Chicago was calling him on the wire. He excused himself with a small bow that included each of us in turn.
If you want anything, just ask for the old sport. Excuse me, I'll rejoin you later.